Hey guys, they're gonna compare two of the very strong Space Marine chapters, the Iron Hands and the White Scars. Both of them are considered extremely competitive now, and Iron Hands are, I think, considered to be the most powerful Space Marine chapters for a number of reasons at the moment, and White Scars are very near behind them. So if you're trying to start a new Space Marine army and you want to find something that is currently very good, they are a perfect pick for you, and let's discuss which one is the best. Just a little disclaimer, I don't think that one chapter or faction can be inherently stronger than the other. I think it all comes down at the end to the roster, to the player who actually uses the army on the tabletop, but we are going to try to make the most fair comparison here, talking about everything that has to do with playing these and how they would perform against one another on the tabletop. It should help us to decide. Firstly, Iron Hands' strength. So they are remarkably resilient, the most resilient Space Marine chapter out of them all. They are the death guard of the loyal Space Marines. The entire chapter gets 6-up shrug, which means that they will ignore about 18% of all the damage that comes their way, and also all their vehicles basically ignore degradation table, damage table. They double the amount of wounds they have for that damage table, so even if you have like 3 wounds left, it means that you actually have 6, which means that you're likely like on the middle profile, middle bracket, or even better. Moreover, they have access to some simple but extremely powerful defensive buffs, like 5-up Feel No Pain for the command point for infantry models, for just one command point, which is crazy. Like if you have a 10-man Terminator blob, which I discuss in my Iron Hands How to Play video, which I recommend to watch if you think that Iron Hands are your choice. So yes, if you have a 10-man blob of Terminators with Storm Shields, having a 5-up shrug on them is very strong for just one command point. That's crazy. The last one saves psychic power as well, Size Steel Armor it's called. So the same Terminator blob can also have a 0+ save outside of cover, and then in cover a -1 save, which is crazy. Again, so very, very strong buffs for some infantry units, and not only infantry, the +1 save can be on a vehicle as well. And also the Tech Marine buffs you get, like the heal 2 vehicles, 2 different vehicles in the same turn with 1 Tech Marine, or True Warlord trait, which allows you to have +1 to your heal when you're healing something, or make a non-Tech Marine character be able to heal 1 wound on a vehicle, which is kind of a neat thing to have, maybe for your captain. I think there are better traits there, but it's an interesting thing to have to consider. And also you can heal your vehicles just with a psychic power reforge for Warp Charge 5. So a very, very good set of things that can help you keep up those wounds on the vehicles. And remember, they virtually ignore the damage table, which means that they will be firing until the last wound, until they are destroyed. And their second biggest strength, I think, comes from their unparalleled interaction, efficient interaction with the Devastator Doctrine. So apart from the usual extra AP on the heavy guns, you also get reroll once to hit with heavy weapons, and ignoring the penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons. And now, as you can stay in the Devastator Doctrine for the entire game, that's just crazy. And all that means that you have a lot more flexibility in your weapons choices. You're not afraid to take the heavy gun for a squad, like say you run Tactical Marines and you want to bring a last cannon. That last cannon will be hitting on 3s all the time, even when you move, and also reroll on 1s to hit, which is great. Again, self-sufficient squads, meaning that they don't need a captain to reroll those 1s for shooting those heavy weapons, like an Eliminator squad with last fusils. You can plump them on anywhere on the building somewhere in the middle of the board, and they will be firing at 2+ no matter what they do, and rerolling those 1s as well. So extremely accurate firepower. It means also that you might save up some points on the captain even, and that actually makes kind of sense, because in the Iron Hands lore, the Tech Marines are sometimes even more important, the Iron Fathers, as far as I know. I'm not an expert on their lore, so don't judge me if I'm saying something incorrectly. So in any case, you can save some points on characters and have those real ones to hit in combat once you actually reach combat. So if you anticipate there being combat, you can do the Wisdom of the Ancients in the command phase and have those real ones in combat. But until then, you have your real ones to hit for heavy weapons all the time. Now their weaknesses. Probably the biggest weakness they have is their lack of extra mobility. Sure enough, you have access to your typical Wenger Vets, Outriders, everything of that sort, but nothing is added on top of that by the chapter. And Space Marines do have a problem with mobility sometimes. It means that a faster army can actually outmaneuver you and will most likely have a chance to strike first against you in melee. They also don't add anything in terms of melee potential, almost anything. But Space Marines don't really have a problem with that if you're running the correct roster, so I wouldn't say that's a big issue. Apart from Judicia, which any Space Marine chapter can run, you don't have any fight last manipulations. Same with fight first, you don't have those. So it means that you must pick your fights very carefully, especially against opponents who have these abilities, because they will most likely be controlling the tide and ebb of the fight phase. Now let's see what White Scars have in store for us. Absolutely obnoxious speed is what they have. They are the fastest Space Marine chapter there is. Even faster than Space Wolves and Blood Angels, and that's saying something. Their chapter tactic is advance and charge and fall back and charge, meaning that whenever you want to reach your opponent, you can just roll an extra d6 and add basically that result to your potential charge, meaning that you can, instead of being outside of 12, you can be, say, within 9, which is a very big difference considering that you also have a bunch of pluses to your charges available in the chapter. And of course, being able to fall back and charge means that you are never stuck in a combat that you don't desire. You can always pick your fights in your turn and go where your heart wants. Plus, as an additional bonus, you can ignore penalties for firing assault guns when you are running. Not the most critical thing. I actually don't think it actually comes into play that much, to be honest, because a lot of guns are like pistols or rapid fire, so not really affected by that, but still good thing to have. That's already a substantial addition to their mobility. However, their relics, traits, psychic powers, and stratagems bring that to an even better level. For example, the Ride the Wind psychic power plus the Plume of the Plains Runner relic can give you a 6-inch charge from Deep Strike. Ride the Wind psychic power gives you +2 to your charges and advances, which the advanced part you cannot really use because it only affects you in your next movement phase, which is nice, but not always really usable at the moment, because obviously, if your units came from Deep Strike, they did not advance, they just appeared there in your reinforcement step of the movement phase. Bloom of the Plains Runner is just a +1 to your advances and charges, a very good thing, because it's not capped like the Canticle of Hate, which is specifically says that you cannot add a stack anything to it, so it's a 7-inch charge and nothing else. Whereas with Ride the Wind and Plume of the Planesrunner, you can still get those pluses, and that's how you get a 6-inch charge from Deep Strike, which is very, very reliable, especially considering that you also have things like 1 command point Fierce Rivalries, which means that you can have 3d6 charge, keeping the 2 highest rolls, not the crazy 3d6 of Blood Angels of 8th edition. And again, no one prohibits you to have an extra chaplain there for a 7-inch charge for another squad. So you can have one squad advancing, charging, or maybe coming from Deep Strike and charging on a 6, and another squad advancing and charging with the help of a chaplain and having potentially a 7-inch charge, or even better, depending on how close they are. Like Ironheads, they don't have fight last, fight first abilities, but have very strong bonuses in melee, like +1 damage super doctrine. So all your melee weapons in the assault doctrine will be +1 damage. So even the humble chainsword will be damaged too. And also you have a +1 to wound aura from the Khan, which I think Khan is the auto take character for anyone who plays White Scars, because he's just a very good captain with a lot of combat potential for him, but just a crazy aura which buffs all your units in a very important way, because Space Marines sometimes have problems with punching something that's in the next weight category, so to speak. Next is White Scar's weaknesses. There are not many of them because, again, these two chapters are very strong, so they don't have a lot of weaknesses. Compared to Iron Hands, their weakness is exactly the opposite, being their lack of extra protection. They do have some abilities like a right hard, right fast stratagem, which allows you to have -1 to hit on a unit that advanced, which is great if you anticipate your unit being shot at and you know that they've advanced and you could not have charged, you were too far away still, so you protect them in this way. And Spirit of Chagori's psychic power is also a good one, just to put a -1 to hit on the opponent's unit. Mostly they are limited to the basic Space Marine level, which is not bad, don't get me wrong, but just not the Iron Hands level, not even close. They are also significantly handicapped by the internal limitations of the Space Marine Codex, like the lack of Primaris Assault Squads, Primaris Vanguard Squads, no real combat weapons on units like Outriders, which would be a perfect thing for White Scars with their 4 wounds and very good speed and a bunch of extra attacks on the charge, but that's specifically why they only have chainswords. Even the Sergeant doesn't have something like a power sword or, God forbid, Thunderhammer. No jump pack Primaris characters as well, and so on. It's not a big deal because we still have our Firstborn guys. It's just a stylistic problem, I think, aesthetical. I just would love there to be more of these Primaris guys, and GW are just feeding us a very, very slow diet of releases. Like for the Desolation Squad, I read somewhere that they were ready at the end of 8th edition already. They were ready to be shown to us, at least, maybe even produced or sold. So, and they waited until almost the end of 9th edition to show us them. So maybe the same stuff is happening with all the units that I'm talking about now, like the Primaris Terminators. They're probably going to be released somewhere when the 10th edition is released. And why they're not here yet? Probably just because Games Workshop are playing the same game as Apple did for a bunch of years with iPhones. They're just trying to limit the amount of innovations they bring because they don't want to run out of them too quickly. Let's compare the chapter's secondary objectives. So the White Scars have the Lightning Strike secondary. It's a Purge the Enemy category objective, competing with Bring It Down, Codex Warfare, and Assassination. So Bring It Down, obviously killing vehicles, Codex Warfare being killing enemy units when your army is in each of the particular doctrines, which is a very good secondary for Iron Hands, because you get 2 points for each kill you make when you are in the Devastator doctrine, and that's where Iron Hands are always are. So that's why I'm glad that the Iron Hand secondary is actually no mercy, no respite category. It means that you will be able to take that Codex Warfare, which you really want to take. And obviously Assassination, which is killing characters. So let's read through the Lightning Strike secondary and see what we have here. Score 3 victory points for each enemy character or monster unit that was destroyed by a melee attack by White Scars unit that made a charge move. Okay, that's quite simple. A good thing, which is why it's good is because it combines basically Assassination and Bring It Down, sort of, in one, but the limitations that you need to be killing stuff in melee, which you're probably going to be doing anyway, so that's why it's good. Second clause is score 1 victory point for each other enemy unit that was destroyed by a melee attack made by a White Scars unit made a charge move. Okay, so now you get points for killing anything in combat. Again, very good. And another 1 victory point for each enemy unit that was destroyed by a ranged attack made by White Scars unit from your army that advanced this turn. This one is also good because we have a way to make even heavy weapons fire after advancing with a stratagem. So it means that there is a possibility of you scoring that as well in some instances. So this secondary is definitely better than Assassination if you're running against an army that has a lot of characters, because you will probably be reaching those characters in combat. Yes, there is a chance that you kill them with something else like shooting or maybe psychic powers, which White Scars have some nice psychic powers, but probably you're killing them in combat. And obviously, if your opponent has a lot of monsters, it's a great secondary because, again, you will probably be killing the monsters in combat. If your opponent doesn't have both characters and monsters really in their list, I don't recommend taking that. Probably think of something else like Codex Warfare. It's a perfect secondary if you're playing against something that has both characters or monsters, and that's a great option to have if there's like a list where there are 2 characters and a bunch of monsters. So monsters by themselves would not bring you enough for bringing it down, and characters by themselves also will not net you enough points. But in combination with Lightning Strike, that's how you get enough points to justify taking the secondary. Codex Warfare is not the best choice for White Scars, though, because you really want to be in the Assault Doctrine, and it means that you will only be getting 25% of the theoretical points unless you actually manage to kill something in Tactical and Devastator, which is possible, don't get me wrong, because you should have some firepower, and there is a possibility that you kill something in the first turn, but you're basically only limited to the first turn for the Devastated Doctrine, so you have 1 turn to do it. And then you are limited to your second turn to kill something with Assault and Rapid Fire guns, which again may not be very easy to do because that's not the most prominent, popular type of weapon in Space Marine lists. Now, Cold Fury, the Iron Hands secondary. So obviously, as I already discussed, Iron Hands do have a big advantage here because for them, Codex Warfare is just a bonkers good secondary, whereas for White Scars it's just as for any other Space Marine chapter, probably even on the worse side because they don't really want to have a lot of guns and they don't really want to have a lot of rapid fire and assault guns, whereas Iron Hands have all the guns. So no mercenary spy category is good, though you are in competition with Oaths of Moment, which is a very, very strong secondary, especially now when it's back to its former glory with 2 points being scored when you are within the center objective, within the center of the board, sorry. So you are competing with that and No Prisoners and Grind Them Down. No Prisoners and Grind Them Down are out of the question. Grind Them Down is just a very bad secondary, to be honest. And No Prisoners is a very situational choice, which is, it's probably unlikely that you will ever encounter a situation where No Prisoners would be better than Cold Fury or the Oaths of Moment. Unless you're playing just against a crazy horde of 1/1 models that are easy to kill, you are better off with either of these 2. What is the Cold Fury secondary? At the end of your turn, score 1 victory point for each of the following conditions you satisfy for a maximum of 4 victory points. By the way, the Lightning Strike, you can score a maximum of 5 per turn for the secondary. So we have some limitations here. So what conditions? 1 or more Iron Hands vehicle units, excluding aircraft from your army, are within your opponent's deployment zone. That one is quite difficult unless you're running something like Land Speeders, which, well, they are not a bad choice, just not the best in my opinion for Iron Hands. 1 or more Iron Hands vehicles are within 6 of the center of the battlefield. That's where you kind of tapping into the Oaths of Moment field. So it needs to be an Iron Hands vehicle unit, which is a problem, and it also only gives you 1 point, but it's a part of a bigger secondary, so you're getting some of that Oaths of Moment potential back. The third one is 1 or more enemy units were destroyed by a range attack by a vehicle, and 1 or more enemy units were destroyed by a melee attack by the same or any other Iron Hands vehicle. So a very good secondary, because any secondary that makes you do the stuff that you would already be doing, which is, for the first clause, it's advancing towards your opponent's line, which is kind of hard but can happen somewhere at the end of the game. And the 3 last things are actually very doable because you want to be charging with your dreadnoughts and you want to be running dreadnoughts if you're running Iron Hands. You want to be shooting stuff and you want to be within 6 of the center, usually, especially when there is an objective there, and a lot of maps do have objectives close to that or right in the center. So obviously, if you're playing like a crazy Iron Hands infantry list, don't take the secondary because you will not score anything for it, but probably you're running vehicles with Iron Hands as you should, and if so, that's a great choice. I would consider taking Oaths if there is an objective marker in the center, because it's a very powerful synergy and a bit easier to score than some of the other things we have here in Cold Fury, because we actually need to do stuff in Cold Fury, whereas Oaths of Moment is so strong because it's mostly a passive secondary. You just need to be within center, so you're not like charging anyone, killing anything, not taking an objective away from your opponent or something like that. You need to not fail morale and not fall back. Again, you are not doing something instead of doing something. And the last one is the only active component where you need to kill characters, vehicles, monsters. So that's why I love Oath so much from the player's standpoint. From the aesthetics, maybe it's not the best thing. I would love Space Marines to be always in a pressured situation to actually do stuff, but from the game standpoint, it's a very good secondary. So in this case, I would probably take Oaths, but for all other matters, and especially if you have a lot of Iron Hands vehicles, as you should, I would take Cold Fury. So in my opinion, from the secondary standpoint, the Iron Hands are now, on the winning side. And now let's analyze the rosters that I've prepared for Iron Hands and for White Scars. These are two, in my opinion, very powerful lists that I've built for us here to compare. Obviously, it depends very much on who pilots these and what happens on the tabletop, what terrain we have and all that. So this video will only give you an average estimation, like a general overview of the comparison between these two, and all the final decisions will have to be made by yourself. So in any case, let's go through these. So we have a captain on bike here. He has a relic, Plume of the Plains Runner, and the Storm Shield and the Thunderhammer. So he kind of can fight, but not really there for that. He's mostly there to be a fast provider of that +1 to advance and charge for everyone who needs it, and also be relatively tough. Next, we have a librarian there for that sweet Ride the Wind psychic power. He's a chief librarian as well, and has the Psychic Mastery Wallet trait, because I think that it's an auto take for all the librarians that you run with Space Marines, because you really want those powers to go off. If you're taking librarian, you should take him with this upgrade. Otherwise, why do you bother taking a librarian in the first place if you are okay with fading powers? Third one is Primaris Chaplain on bike. He is what's called in some circles a slappin. So he's a combat chaplain who does a lot of damage in combat. He has 2 warlord traits, so we're spending 3 command points on him. 2 warlord traits. First is Master of Sanctities warlord trait, Wise Orator for that +1 to our litanies, which are Canticle of Hate and Mantra of Strength. Canticle of Hate is our favorite, +2 to charges and +3 to paladins and consolidations. And the Mantra of Strength is a bunch of buffs for our chaplain. I think it's +1 strength, +1 damage on our attacks, and +1 attack. So a very, very strong buff. And our second warlord trait is Chugurain Storm, which is +D3 attacks on the charge. So our chaplain will have a bunch of attacks, and to add to that, we have a relic on him, Benediction of Fury, which is a damage 3 Crozius. So with Mantra of Strength, there'll be a damage 4 Crozius, and with our Devastating Charge, Super Doctrine, in the Assault Doctrine, our chaplain will actually have damage 5 on his Crozius on the charge. And that's so cool that it's already worth it just because of that fact. We also actually need someone to be fast enough to provide that +2 to charges for our other units. Next, we have 1 Troop's Choice, which are the 5-man Assault Intercessor squad with Thunderhammer on the Sergeant. They are very good, the Assault Intercessors anyway, and with White Scars they're just bonkers good. Very cheap, very strong, very dangerous in combat, especially turn 3 onwards. And the Thunderhammer on the Sergeant is just a free gift from Games Workshop, now in Arcs of Omen, so why not take it? Next, we have some elites. We have 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts with Multi-Meltas. I'm back to using Contemptors in my lists because we have lost Armor of Contempt, so now that 5-up Invulnerable Save is back to being very, very important. And we also need to have at least some shooting in this list, so that's why we have these 3 Multi-Meltas available. Not a huge threat, to be honest, but enough to provide some covering firepower. And next is the meat and the fat of the list, which are 5 Terminators, Terminator Assault Squad. That's our tactical choice. They're very cheap. They have a Teleport Homer for some late game ability, and they're just very good with those Thunderhammers, and with all the buffs to the charges, they will probably actually make the charge and be a big pain for our opponents. And then we have 2 10-man Vanguard squads with Lightning Claws. One of them have jump packs and one of them don't. So the one that doesn't have jump packs, the guys that don't have jump packs, they are inside a drop pod, so they can actually charge turn 1, and that's the big part here. So if you do some careful positioning, you can actually get that 6-inch charge from Dip Strike turn 1, which is very scary for your opponent, and they will know that, so they will have to either take it on the chin or do something about it, which means probably just conceding the mid board to you completely for the first 2 turns, which is good for you because you are ultimately faster than most of your opponents. So you can stay at the safe distance, score those points, and as soon as they poke their nose out, charge them first. And the second squad is very helpful with that because their jump packs will allow you to move, then advance, then have that +1 to advance, and have that +3 potentially to your charges. So very, very strong combination indeed. And we also have 3 squads of Outriders here to provide us some cheap mobility and also protection for our characters, also some help with the objectives. Maybe if you need to charge a troops unit on objective and you don't want to throw your entire 10-man Vanguard Vet squad because it would be a massive overkill, you just put one of the or 2 of the Outrider squads there and they'll do the job just fine. And that comes to 1 command point and 2,000 points on the nose for the White Scars. And now let's look at the Iron Hands. So for the Iron Hands, we don't have a captain here, which is a rarity in my list, but I've already explained why we may skip him. We have a Librarian in Phobos Armor again. I had 5 points to spare in both of these lists, so that's why I've upgraded the Librarians to have Phobos Armor. I actually don't think it's necessary, but I wasn't able to find anything to spend those 5 points on because everything is so free now in Arks of Omen. So that's why we have Phobos Librarian. We have a Psychic Mastery on him again, so again, cheap Librarian. We have a relic on him, which is the Gorgon's Chain. So he's very important for our list, and the Gorgon's Chain is probably one of the best relics you could have, defensive relics on a Librarian, because it gives him -1 to wound for shooting attacks and a 4+ invulnerable save on top of that. So a very strong relic, and I think it's worth spending a command point to make sure that our Librarian survives until the end of the game, hopefully. Because I did have situations where my Librarian was cut out of protection by Lookout Sir sometimes when, for example, half of my squad got killed and the coherency was a problem and someone was able to shoot at him. So I know how it feels to lose a Librarian on turn 1 or 2 when your Librarian is very important to you. So that's why, if you can, you should prevent that. Next, we have a Primaris Lieutenant here because he's so damn cheap and he's so damn good now, and he doesn't have anything on him, just what he has, the war gear, shield and sword, all that stuff. No relics, no traits, we don't need that on him, we just need his rerolls. Next we have a Primaris Tech Marine. He has the chapter command upgrade of Master of the Forge, and he is our warlord just because it's very fluffy and we actually need someone to heal our vehicles. Next, we have a 5-man heavy intercessor squad with the Executor bolt rifle, with Executor bolt rifles and an Executor heavy bolter. I think it's a very good choice for Iron Hands, even though heavy intercessors are not the most optimal choice usually, but with Iron Hands, reroll ones to hit and ignoring the penalty for moving shooting those bolt rifles, I think that's the perfect spot to put them into. We need someone to be staying on those home objectives, and that's why I've chosen them. They are a perfect candidate for that, I think, for Iron Hands. Next, we have Elites, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with the regular combo of Plasma and all the correct guns. We have the 10-man Terminator Assault Squad that we discussed already with the Teleport Homer for some mobility shenanigans. And we have a Venerable Dreadnought who uses the awesome March of the Ancients threat that allows him to become a character, so he cannot be targeted. And we also give him the Target Protocols strat to give our Dreadnoughts 1 reroll to hit, 1 reroll to wound, 1 reroll to damage turn, which is great. It saves you a bunch of command points. I've tried that myself. It really is really helpful. And he has a Twin Blast Cannon to blink away in the relative safety behind the big Redemptor's backs. We also have here 2 Devastator squads, Devastator Marine squads inside a drop pod. So you can see we have a similar thing going on here, both for White Scars and for Iron Hands. White Scars have a first turn crazy charge with 10 men, Lightning Claw, Vanguard Rats, and the Iron Hands have first turn just crazy melted death coming from the upper atmosphere. So we have 4 multi-melters in each of the squads, and also a combi melter plus Thunderhammer on the Sergeant. So a lot of melter shots that are going to be rerolling once to hit all of the heavy guns, and it'll be a big pain for your opponent, and it's very hard to hide from that because it's literally the first turn. And if you want, you can wait as well. And as if we did not have enough firepower in this list, we also have a 5-man Eradicator squad with heavy melta rifles, because that's the best choice for Eradicators, obviously, because you just get free better damage there, and you still don't suffer any penalty for moving and shooting. You also gain the reroll ones to hit, so that's the only choice, and 1 multi-melter obviously on one of the guys. So that's the Iron Hands list. Now when we try to compare these two, it's actually a very difficult thing to do, and that's why I think these are 2 very strong chapters, because honestly I don't know who would be here on the winning side, because yes, the Iron Hands can just blast away a bunch of White Scars turn 1, so White Scars can charge and kill a bunch of Iron Hands in combat. So it's really dependent on how you're gonna use this list, or how the terrain setup will look, because if you can hide from the shots of Iron Hands for a while until you charge them, the White Scars will have a better situation. If it's the reverse and the board is quite empty and you can actually see for long distance and there are no buildings to hide behind, that drop pod can kill a bunch of stuff in turn 1, and then all the other stuff will be able to finish off the remaining units. So I cannot say, to be honest, which chapter is better in this case. But what I can say is a recommendation for you as players for what you can expect from the playstyle of each of these. And that's the biggest point of this video, is that you should not be looking you should not be looking for something that is innately powerful, because the power of chapters is very fluent. It changes all the time, and now Iron Hands are on top, and a month from now they can be one of the worst chapters there are. And Imperial Fists, which are now lacking, they may be the best. So you should be choosing the army based on what you like. And if you like the fast and mind-blowing speed assault and killing stuff in melee and having a bunch of bikers on the tabletop and everything being crazy and all that, I think you should go with White Scars. However, if you want to outlast and outshoot any opponent on the tabletop, save for Death Guard maybe, you are better off with Iron Hands. They are a perfect choice for that. And also if you want to run a bunch of dreadnoughts, a bunch of vehicles, if you like tanks, all that stuff. If you are an Imperial Guardsman in your soul, but you just want to have those chunky Space Marines on the tabletop, the Iron Hands are for you, because they are the perfect choice to run a bunch of vehicles. So that's my theory on that. Also, a quick remark, some of you attentive viewers might have noticed that I don't have Khan in here as an HQ for White Scars. It's because I needed someone to carry the Plume of the Plains Runner, and I wanted that someone to be very fast. So as we cannot bring Khan on a bike, I decided to have a captain on bike instead. But yes, Khan is a very, very good choice, and if you believe that you can change up stuff here and have Plume on someone else and have Khan instead, I think it's a very, very valid point, and you should do that because his +1 to wound is extremely good. Just remember that if you really want to max out the power of this list, you probably need Khan there. So that's it, guys. Let me know what you think about this video. Obviously, we still don't know who's the biggest and strongest boy on the block. Is it the White Scars or the Iron Hands? Maybe it's more likely to be Iron Hands now, just because of the secondaries. If we were to put them in like identical scenarios, or maybe not clash them against one another, but clash them against other opponents, maybe Iron Hands would be on top in most cases, but still remember that the most important part is what you like. And I hope this video helped you understand that. And I'll see you next time.